Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark, a.k.a. Derringer. Today is Sunday, March 10th, and you are listening to episode 199 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for Planetside news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. If you guys have been longtime listeners to the show, you know that March 10th is kind of a special day for me. That is my daughter's birthday. My daughter will actually be turning 19 today, so that's some exciting news. Yeah, I'm old enough to have a 19-year-old daughter, and I'm sure there's a bunch of you out there who are 19, 20, 23 who are like, shit, Derringer is old enough to be my father. Yes, it's true. I am old enough to be your father. Don't make me send you to your room for not playing Planetside 2. But all joking aside, again, very excited today for her birthday. She's home on spring break right now from college, so all kinds of stuff going on around the Derringer household. It's party central now at my house currently, so got a lot of stuff to do over the next couple days and stuff like that, so I'll do my best to get into Planetside 2. But before we go that way, I just wanted to take a moment and go back to that Support the Show tab, because right now I'm getting closer and closer to the annual server costs for keeping this show on the air and stuff like that for you. So if you've ever wanted to donate to the show, now is the time. Again, use my Amazon link. That one costs you absolutely nothing. Subscribe on Patreon to get access to the show earlier than anybody else, all kinds of stuff like that. Any way that you can help me out, I would greatly appreciate it. So with all that stuff out of the way, what's actually in store for this week's show? Well, first I want to go over the one topic I wanted to talk about last week but couldn't squeeze in. That is the Air Anomaly Smash that I was really excited about. Then after that, it's back to current news with Cyrious Gaming's newest YouTube video asking if it's worth getting into Planetside 2 in 2019. Then I want to talk about some quality of life changes because that's popping up again on Reddit. And then I'm going to finish this week with some furry talk. Yes, you heard me right, furry talk. So you really want to strap in now as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. Now, like I said, first up this week, I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about that Air Anomaly Smash, which occurred on Saturday, March 2nd, so just a little over a week ago. And if you guys weren't familiar with it, put on by Planetside Battles, as always. This was one that I was really excited about because the Air Anomaly itself is a unique event within Planetside 2. It's the first time that they've really gotten big air battles to go on over something within the game itself. Now, on live, my big complaint with the Air Anomalies is they turn into a runaway 9 times out of 10. Very rarely do we see even battles where, it's right up neck and neck until the end and then one faction takes it over. So the fact that they wanted to put on a smash of just Air Anomaly stuff was billed as a way to get really good competitive play going on, and not knowing how it's going to end. Who is the faction who's in the lead in the beginning going to win it, or is there going to be some sort of back and forth, or what? And we definitely were treated to something really good in this Smash. Now, the one complaint that I have with it is that there weren't a lot of pilots playing in this, and from listening to what the folks who put this together, they had a lot of people that signed up, and then maybe half the people that signed up actually showed up to play it, which it's a gripe for me because I didn't get to see as many people playing it, but it's a good thing if you were a newer pilot playing in something like this, because it seems like a lot of people who don't fly normally or just wanted to get their toes wet flying and stuff like this were able to play on this and have a good time, because the best of the best pilots didn't seem to come out and play this, which is kind of surprising to me, but maybe they're off doing other things. What do I know? But again, we were treated to a really good match where it was neck and neck right until the end, and ultimately the PSB guys called it that NC won, even though on the streamer screen TR ended up winning. So I'm still a little hazy on who actually won it. But I mean, with 15 seconds to go, the difference between the two factions was like less than 10 points in the Air Anomaly itself. So I mean, it was just such a close match, and it was very enjoyable to watch. I mean, let me rephrase that. The beginning was enjoyable to watch, and I really loved watching the last like 10 minutes of it or so, because I wanted to see who wins. The middle period kind of zoomed through a little of it because I was watching it on a replay. But again, the ending, if you guys missed it, I'll include a link to the Twitch video on it. Go and watch at least the ending of it, just to see how close it is at the end. Now, just so I'm doing my job here, I'm going to give a little bit of feedback to the Planetside Battle guys, in case you guys are listening to this week's show. The guy who was streaming it, first of all, I don't even remember who it was because he never said his name. That's problem number one. And number two, he seemed to have no idea what the Air Anomaly event was in the game, which kind of seemed strange to me. And he also never explained the rules of how an Air Anomaly works or anything like that. I mean, yeah, if you've played Planetside 2, you should know all that stuff. But this just seemed like kind of things that should have been done at the beginning of the stream. And there was also a lot of downtime at the beginning where he wasn't saying anything. And I think probably he could have used a second caster with him, and they should have talked strategies at the beginning or anything like that. And then I didn't like his choice of music that he was playing during half of it as well. At one point, I zoomed ahead, and it was just F-bombs dropped in my face by whatever he was listening to. So just my little bit of feedback regarding it. But otherwise, if you didn't see it, go watch at least the last 10 minutes just to see how close that final ending is. So again, Air Anomaly Smash happened a week ago. I'm looking forward to the next one, and I hope they get twice as many people involved in it. With that, let's move on to our second topic this week. And that second topic is the newest YouTube video from Cyrious Gaming, where he asked the question, is it still worth getting into Planetside 2 in 2019? And if you want the TLDR, he says yes, it is still worth getting into Planetside 2 in 2019. However, it takes him about 25 minutes just to get to that point. And he spends a lot of time really crapping on Planetside 2. And I know Cyrious is a big Planetside 2 fan. He's one of the biggest people doing YouTube videos about Planetside 2 right now. So I know he's passionate about Planetside 2. But I do think he probably could have done this video a little differently, where he didn't ask the question and then spend 25 minutes talking about everything that's terrible about Planetside 2 or everything bad that came about in Planetside 2 in 2017, 2018, the time frame that he's talking about. And I think if his ultimate response was going to be that, yes, it is worth getting into Planetside 2, that you might have spent more time talking about the good of Planetside 2 rather than the bad of Planetside 2. Because honestly, if I was a brand new player watching this video thinking, should I get into Planetside 2? And you just rattle through a whole bunch of stuff that you think is terrible about the game, I'm not even going to get to the end. I'm just going to make up my mind right then and there and not bother downloading or whatever Planetside 2 and playing Planetside 2. And then you'd miss out on what I consider still a great game. And some of the other stuff that he really didn't go over with, he just kept harping on the fact that the population is declining in Planetside 2. And I agree. The population is declining in Planetside 2. However, that's still not my primary experience in the game itself. I can log in any night and still find good fights on whatever continent that I'm playing on. Maybe that's because I'm a member and I'm able to bypass the population queue and get onto continents and stuff like that. But hey, that's the reason I spend $14.99 a month to continue playing Planetside 2. So I can continue to find all those great fights that are going on within Planetside 2. And again, I never have an issue finding fights within Planetside 2. Now, everybody's definition of good fights in Planetside 2 is different. You know, like a veteran who just wants to kill other players is maybe just looking for a farm and may not find a farm all the time. Someone who is a vehicle main may not always find that huge tank battle going on within Planetside 2. But I can always log in Planetside 2 and find good fights, in my opinion, and play the game and enjoy the game. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, which I recommend, pop into my channel and watch my stuff on YouTube, I always play my show with a background of gameplay that I've recorded. The majority of the time, they're great fights. So, I mean, I kind of disagree with what Cyrious is saying about the population decline. I mean, yes, there is charts showing that there's a decline in players in Planetside 2, but just because there's a decline doesn't mean that we're still not being able to find fights that make it worthwhile in playing Planetside 2. And I wish he spent less time harping on that. Now, I'm not going to say that everything about Cyrious's video is bad or I disagree with everything that he said, because one of the big things that he was pushing for in Planetside 2 is that it's time to lower the barrier of entry for new players in Planetside 2. And I do think that this is something that I hope the devs are really thinking about at this point, because I would like to see cert costs halved, or at least, because right now, just for a new player to get into Planetside 2, you're gonna just the cert climb to unlock a whole bunch of stuff and get to the same level as a veteran is just so insurmountable, especially for a game that is 7 years old at this point. There should be a faster track to get to stuff. And Cyrious quotes World of Warcraft as a prime example. At the end of one expansion, before a new expansion starts, they always lower the curve. And the one that I think about the most is before one of the most recent expansions, they had a way that you could go from invasion to invasion and level up a character in about a day. Now, I don't expect something like that in Planetside 2, but having the cert cost at minimum, or even making the levels to go from one to the next lower or easier than they are right now, I think it might be time to do something like that. And especially because you've got your established veteran players who are still going to play their BR-120 character, ASP, whatever character. But I think you want to get more people more newer players to that ASP part, so that they might become a member for at least a month to get that free unlock for the ASP stuff. Again, I agree with what Cyrious is saying on that, and I hope that might be something that the devs are considering at this point. Now, moving along on his video, he did gather some interest from the devs and Rel specifically, and Rel responded to Cyrious's video, and I'm going to read what he wrote because I thought it was important. And he said, there are a lot of reasons that Planetside 2 is where it's at, and why it's had a declining player base since 2012, and why it's had an especially rough go of it early this year / late last year, as I've mentioned previously. And he links to something he mentioned previously where he points out that normally in regular Planetside 2 development, we'd be hitting an influx of new content and gameplay improvements, but they're behind a wall with this NS Operatives and DirectX 11 deployment that they're trying to put out. So until they can get to that, they're kind of stuck. He calls it a portcullis. So they're stuck behind that as they're waiting for this stuff to be launched. And that could be one reason why there's this declining player base. Now, he goes on to say that Cyrious has most of the events in order, but not the context behind them, and is instead pointing to the reasons he's made in earlier videos. That makes sense because you only know what you know, but it's worth saying that most of those videos were off the mark to varying degrees and entailed wild speculation about financial pressures and managerial motivations. Where he's correct is that Planetside 2 is still worth playing. He finishes up by saying, ultimately, it doesn't matter the outlook because my goal, Rel's goal, has been and will continue to be to increase populations over time. It's unrealistic, ambitious, and far beyond the scope of the resources we currently have available. But what that means for all of you is that the game gets to be around for years to come. And end quote from Rel. So you can see that last section, Rel clearly indicates that there aren't a lot of people working on Planetside 2, and we know that, but he still has these unrealistic goals that he's set for himself to continue to try to increase populations. And that if that means apologizing for errors that he's made or making changes to roll back some of the Combined Arms Initiative things, or to change the way NC maxes work in the game, because that's one of the biggest complaints that players have, he's willing to make those changes within the game itself. So again, I agree with Cyrious. I agree with Rel. Planetside 2 is still worth getting into in 2019 with some caveats, especially being that I hope that they're going to make some changes to that barrier of entry for newer players, because I'd like to see another influx of new players, especially if we make some of these changes with the NS operatives and DirectX 11, which brings old players back, which might also bring new players back as population rises. So again, I'm going to include a link to Cyrious's video because even though it's long, way too long of a video series, I'm sorry, it is worth watching and at least seeing the points that he puts forward, so that you can have what Rel's response is in context. But with that, let's move on to this week's episode of Veteran's Voice. Take it away, Romus.
When trying to claim victory on the battlefield, there are many tactics. The ever-popular Zerg Rush, or when you take your entire faction's population and jam them into one base, certainly will get the job done, if not being a little boring. However, most of the time, you don't have that kind of numbers. You have to do something else. Allow me to introduce you to something that makes sense. I call it the grenade. I see a lot of people running headlong into waves of enemies, screaming like a barbarian, waving their rifle like a battle axe. That's a stupid idea. When you're insulting an entrenched enemy, you need something bigger than a scalpel. You need something with more oomph. Guns or scalpels. Grenades. Grenades are a big honkin' hammer. After talking with more than a few players, I can say with confidence that infantry fights rarely have flak armor involved. Why? Well, when you're only taking bullets, why use anti-explosive armor? You can fling the blinding grenades, or the stun grenades, or the EMP grenades, or my favorite, the ones that just blow up. Every single player has at least one frag grenade, so what's your excuse for not using it? You can throw it in a window, bounce it off a door, whatever you need to do to get it into the middle of that room. I can say with much confidence that every time I've tossed a grenade into a room full of enemies, I've made at least one or two of them move, and made one or two of them take damage. It's not exactly rocket surgery. Doesn't matter if you kill or maim the one guy that ran in ahead of you, everybody else who runs in after that grenade explodes is going to get victory. In fact, I run with grenade bandolier and underbarrel grenade launcher whenever possible. Back when the war for Araxis started, we were equipping our max suits with frag grenade launchers. It was so effective that the brass for all factions sat down and decided to outlaw the practice. Maybe that's because mass frag grenades is a little bit too powerful. Give you something to think about. Now, if you'll excuse me, Derringer, I'm gonna go practice tossing some pineapples into windows. Goodness knows I'm terrible at it. You probably are too. Take a few hours in VR, or even just a few minutes. See you next time. Grenade out! No bloggins, it's a dummy. Get out from under the desk.
So what I'm getting from that is that Romus is the reason that there are so much grenade spam in the game. Grenade bandolier, really, Romus? I don't know what to say. But with that, topic number 3 this week was a quick question that someone posted on Reddit asking what small, easily implemented quality of life changes would you like to see in Planetside 2, which this is something, this is a post that crops up every now and then where people are asking for different things within the game itself. And honestly, I'm not sure how much we're going to see stuff like this. A lot of it is UI stuff within the game itself. And I know from a photo that they posted not too long ago of the Planetside Arena team, we saw that Antoine, who is working on the UI stuff, is over there working on Planetside Arena as well. So the question is, what really help is he doing with Planetside 2? Sure, he's probably working on both and stuff like that. But I did want to talk about some of the things that people were talking about, some things that I would like to see quality of life changes to the game. I'd love to see the drop-down menu for quick vehicles changed so that I can choose more than one loadout. I mean, I think it's about time we can get something like that. I would love to see a better crosshair overlay brought into the game. So as HK says, I shouldn't have to use a third-party program for something as trivial as a crosshair for shooting vehicle weapons in third person. If they're going to allow it in the recursion tracker, then why can't they bring something like that into the game itself? Some other things that I'd like to see added are, I'd love to see an option to rebind the key for throwing ammo when playing Engineer. I can't tell you how many times that I've forgotten that I'm playing Engineer, thought I was playing Heavy, tried to pop my shield, and instead threw ammo and got killed. That's one. One that my friend Znipsel points out is being able to disable different UI elements, and he specifically says that he doesn't care about every generator terminal or whatever that is around me. And Haze Flare responds that he can't explain the number of times he hasn't seen somebody because there's a giant capture generator thing floating over his head. So I mean, that's a small one that I would love to be able to change. I would love to see, as Lemenis points out, a universal decal selection like camos have. I mean, how difficult would that be to have a third little box down at the bottom where you can choose a default decal? I would pay money to have that one in game. And again, those are just some of the things that other people have pointed out that I thought were great little ideas. Again, I said it in the last topic. I know that the devs are really all hands on deck on NSO and DirectX 11 right now. So I would hope that they would take a topic like this to heart as maybe the next round of stuff, in a couple of months, maybe looking at some other little quality of life changes. I mean, when Antoine came on board, they dropped a whole bunch of them on us and everybody was all excited about it, but now we haven't been talking about them in a while. And that's why I think it might be time to talk about them again. But with that, let's move on to the fourth and final topic this week. And that last topic was a picture that was posted by Catgirl VS. I mean, if you don't know Catgirl VS by now, you need to become acquainted. I see her in game all the time, and I love chatting with her. She's the one who always posts the furry NSFW things to Daybreak Game, to the Reddit and stuff like that. This time she's asking for Spitfire Cosmetics. And posted a nice picture of a VS Catgirl sitting on a erect Spitty. That's the best way to describe it. But more than anything, I didn't really want to talk about this topic about getting Spitfire Cosmetics, but this made me realize, based on one of her posts in here, is that there's actually a /r/Planetside Furry subreddit now. And while when I went into it, some of it kind of made me scratch my head. I wasn't sure if everybody was aware that there's a Planetside Furry subreddit right now that a lot of the more unsuitable pictures get posted to. And, please go in there knowing in advance that you might be seeing some things that you don't want to see. But if you're a fan of drawn pictures from Shockwave is a big one who does a lot of them. If you're a fan of stuff that he's done or that Catgirl VS has been posting on Reddit, maybe you should go check out the /r/Planetside Furry subreddit to get some idea of what else is out there. And that's just in addition to getting some Spitfire cosmetics into the game itself. That one was the last little throwaway topic just for you, Catgirl VS. With that, let's move on to housekeeping this week.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
Housekeeping.
Go away.
I coming anyway?
So I did get a couple emails. First one I got from Faber1, and he writes, Dear Derringer, first off, thanks for a lot of all the work you do with the podcast. Really something that keeps the community alive. I always look forward to Mondays to listen to another episode. However, I have two questions. One, this one is regarding one of Cyrious Gaming's quotes in his latest video, Is It Still Worth Getting into Planetside 2 in 2019? He states that the game belongs in a museum. The game is, after its prime, it should slowly fade away and be remembered as a promising project. I realize that the game will probably never get more development than it has right now, but to me it seems too early to throw in the towel with PS2. What is your take on this? And I'll take a moment and actually talk about this. Yeah, I purposely didn't say this when I covered the video in the earlier topic because I read your email obviously beforehand, Faber1, and wanted to take a moment and talk about it here rather than in that. And I was kind of offended that he thinks the game belongs in a museum because it's a 7-year-old game, but there are lots of games older than Planetside 2 at this point that people are playing. I mean, World of Warcraft is a great example. I mean, sure, it's been upgraded over time, but so is Planetside 2. And does World of Warcraft belong in a museum? No. Some other examples of games that, quote unquote, should belong in a museum if you base it on age could be something like, do you think League of Legends belongs in a museum? Do you think something along the lines of CSGO, which, I mean, there's hundreds of players all the time, thousands of people playing that all the time. Do you think something like that belongs in a museum? Or Team Fortress 2, which still garners hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of players all the time? I mean, I really disagree with the comment about this game belongs in a museum. When the game is gone, no one's playing it anymore, the servers are shut down, that's when a game like Planetside 2 belongs in a museum, not when there's still a player base playing the game, having a good time playing the game, and there's current development, like you said, lots of development going on for the game right now, that it's definitely way too early to throw in the towel on PS2. So again, I was kind of offended by the belongs in a museum comment. Moving back to Faber1's email, he says, and this is a bit more personal of a question that I didn't have to answer on the podcast, but I will. He says that I stream Planetside 2 regularly on Twitch, and I would love to listen and discuss your podcast with the chat during the stream. I don't know if you'd be okay with that. Faber1, if you want to play this podcast on your stream and point people to listen to my show each Monday when it comes out, I have absolutely zero problem with you playing it on the stream, chatting with your folks about it, anything like that. It's more advertisement or getting more ears onto my show. I'm perfectly happy with it. It's something that I've always wanted to do myself, but just have never got around to do it. So please feel free. And then he finishes up with anyways, keep up the good work. Again, Faber1, thanks for that email. Next, I also got an email from Romus. Yes, this is Romus of Veterans Voice fame, and he says, Greetings, Derringer. I would like to apologize to the listeners this week for making any of you listening on a mobile device stop and look at your device expecting to see a Facebook message. It appears that Bloggins left his device in the studio, and with my headphones on, I didn't hear it go off until after he presented to me the finished product. Rest assured that he has been severely reprimanded. Side note for those of you using the enlisted washroom, watch out for the skinny kid with the toothbrush scrubbing the corners. Now, Romus, I listened back and I didn't hear it, but when I listen to myself talk again on Monday, I'm going to listen closely for it. And then I'll make sure that I make a mess of the washroom floor so Bloggins knows he fucked up. All right. That's going to be it for this week's show. As always, how can you get in touch with me or the show? Well, first off, as always, please visit my website, www.instantactionpodcast.com. Again, check out that Support the Show tab while you're there. You can also email me, like Faber1 and Romus did, instantactionshow@gmail.com. You can call me and leave me a voicemail, 347-4VM-4PS2. Those digits are 347-486-4772. And also, you can follow the show on Twitter @InstActPodcast. But in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button.